The coworker who sat next to me for 2 years was keeping a journal about me. Not a diary, not notes. A journal. Dated entries, observations, things I'd said, things I'd worn, times I'd arrived and left. I only found out because he left it open on his desk by accident. His name was Joel. We worked together at a property management firm. Mid-sized, open-plan office, the kind of place where you know everyone well enough to nod at, but not well enough to actually know. Joel was unremarkable in almost every way. Quiet, punctual, never started conversations but always finished them smoothly. The kind of coworker you stop noticing after the first month. I stopped noticing him. That was my mistake. The journal was a black hardcover notebook. I saw it when I came back from lunch early one Thursday. He wasn't at his desk. The book was open, face up, and my name was at the top of the page. Not in passing, not as part of a list. My name, as a heading, with a date underneath it. I didn't touch it. I sat down and I stared at my screen and I waited for him to come back. He came back. He closed the notebook without looking at me. He put it in his bag. He said, "Good lunch?" And I said yes, and that was it. I told myself it was nothing. Work notes, project tracking, something technical I wasn't understanding out of context. I told myself this for about a week until I noticed that the notebook came out every day. Not during meetings, not during work calls. It came out when people were talking, when someone mentioned something personal, when a conversation happened nearby that had nothing to do with work. He'd open it, write something brief, close it again. Smooth, practiced, like breathing. I started watching him the way he'd apparently been watching everyone else. Within 2 weeks, I had a list of my own. He had recorded the time our manager arrived and left every day for what appeared to be months. He knew things about colleagues that hadn't been shared publicly. A pregnancy that hadn't been announced, a disciplinary issue that was supposed to be confidential, a salary figure that only HR should have had access to. I didn't know how much of this was in the notebook. I didn't know what else he had. But I knew the information was real because I'd been present when some of those things were said, in quiet conversations, in spaces that should have been private. The notebook wasn't the problem. The notebook was just where he stored what he collected. The problem was how he collected it. I went back through months of small memories, Joel borrowing a phone charger and leaving it plugged in near a desk that wasn't his, Joel volunteering to fix a printer jam in the office manager's corner, Joel consistently taking the long route to the kitchen, the one that passed by HR and the 2 senior partner offices. None of it had seemed like anything at the time. That's the thing about someone who is genuinely careful. Nothing they do looks like anything at the time. I went to our HR manager, and I was careful about how I framed it. I didn't say surveillance. I didn't say anything I couldn't support. I said I had observed a pattern of behavior that concerned me, and I described it plainly. She thanked me. She said she'd look into it discreetly. Joel was gone within the month. No announcement, no farewell. His desk was cleared while most of us were in a team meeting, and when we came back, the space was just empty. Our manager said his contract had ended. Nobody asked follow-up questions, because nobody knew enough to ask them. Except Dana from accounts, who came to my desk 2 days later and said, very quietly, that she'd heard IT had found remote access software on 3 machines in the office. Software that hadn't been installed by the company. She didn't know who had installed it. I didn't tell her what I suspected. I didn't tell anyone. What would I have said that wouldn't have made me sound like I was the paranoid one? But I've thought about it many times since. About the gap between what I saw and what was actually happening. About how much longer it had been going on, before I noticed. About everyone in that office who still doesn't know that for some period of time, possibly a long one, someone was watching them work and writing it down. And about what exactly he was planning to do with all of it. I was the last person in the building. Or I thought I was. I worked evening shifts at a legal document processing center, a quiet, fluorescent-lit office on the 4th floor of a building that emptied out by 7 most nights. My shift ran until midnight. It was usually me and one other person, a senior processor named Carl. But Carl had left early that night with a family emergency. He'd said goodbye. I'd heard the elevator. I'd been alone for almost 3 hours. At 10:40, the light in the copy room turned on. The copy room was down a short hallway, directly behind me. The door was mostly closed. The light came on, visible under the gap at the bottom, that pale yellow rectangle appearing on the hallway floor where there had been nothing a moment before. I turned around, slowly. The door hadn't opened. No footsteps. No sound at all. I told myself it was a motion sensor on a delay, an electrical fault, something left running. I went back to my screen. I watched the rectangle of light under the door. It stayed on. After 5 minutes, I walked down the hallway and pushed the door open. The copy room was empty. The large commercial printer in the corner was running, not printing, but running, its display lit, its fan moving. I checked the print queue. 14 documents were queued. None of them mine. All of them time-stamped from earlier that evening, before Carl had left. I canceled the queue. I turned off the printer. I went back to my desk. At 11:15, I heard footsteps on the floor above me. The floor above us was unoccupied, had been for 2 months, since the firm that leased it relocated. There was no reason for anyone to be up there. The footsteps were slow and even. Not the settling of a building sound, not pipes, not anything I could dismiss easily. They moved from one end of the ceiling to the other, and then they stopped. I sat very still. I called building security. The overnight guard, a man named Raymond, who worked the lobby desk, said he'd come up and check. While I waited, I did not go to the kitchen. I did not go to the bathroom. I did not move from my desk except to face the elevator bank directly. Raymond came up. We took the stairwell to the 5th floor together. The floor was dark and empty. Long rows of vacant workstations, chairs still tucked in from the day the previous tenants left. Raymond walked the full floor with his flashlight. Nothing. We came back down. Raymond stayed with me for 20 minutes, then said he had to get back to the lobby. He said old buildings make noise. He said I should call again if I heard anything else. I said I would. At 11:50, 10 minutes before the end of my shift, I went to collect my jacket from the rack by the elevator. The rack was next to the window that overlooked the building's internal parking structure. I glanced out of habit. Carl's car was in the lot. The same car I'd watched him drive in that morning. It hadn't moved. He had told me he was leaving for a family emergency. I had heard the elevator. I had been alone. I had been certain I was alone. For 3 hours. I took my bag. I took the elevator to the lobby without going back to my desk. I told Raymond at the front desk that Carl's car was still in the lot, and I asked him, calmly, to log it. He wrote it down. I don't know what he did with that log. I called Carl the next morning. He answered on the 3rd ring, said the emergency had been resolved, sounded completely normal. When I mentioned his car, he said he'd arranged a ride. When I asked why he hadn't moved the car, he said he'd pick it up later. He did not ask me why I was asking. I requested a transfer to daytime shifts the following week. I cited personal scheduling needs. They approved it without question. I never worked evenings in that building again, and I never told anyone the full sequence of what had happened that night. Because when you say it out loud, each piece sounds like nothing. It's only when you hold all the pieces together that it starts to feel like something. She told me someone in our office was going to get hurt. She told me 3 times over 6 weeks, and the third time she said it, she looked frightened in a way I hadn't seen before. 2 weeks after that, she wasn't wrong. Her name was Patricia. She was a senior records coordinator at the healthcare billing company where I worked for just under 4 years. She'd been there longer than almost anyone, 11 years, and she had that quality some long-tenured people develop where they notice institutional patterns the way the rest of us notice weather. Background awareness. A reading of the room that operates below conscious thought. Patricia started saying things about our department manager, a man named Hesse, about 8 months before I left. Not dramatic things, not accusations, observations, delivered quietly, in passing. That Hesse's behavior had changed since the third quarter restructure, that he had started pulling individual employees into one-on-ones that weren't on the shared calendar, that 2 people who had raised billing discrepancies in the previous year had both been managed out within 6 months of raising them, that a particular client account, a large one of our biggest, had documentation that didn't match across systems. I listened to Patricia, the way you listen to someone you respect, but quietly believe has become too close to something to see it clearly. I nodded. I said it sounded frustrating. I changed the subject. The second time she raised it, she had specifics, a document reference number, a date range. She said the discrepancy wasn't clerical. She'd been in records long enough to know the difference between a data entry error and something that had been altered deliberately. She said she'd tried to raise it with compliance 6 weeks prior and had been told it was being reviewed. 6 weeks, and she hadn't heard back. Not a follow-up, not an acknowledgement, nothing. I told her to give it more time. I told her these processes move slowly. I told her what was easy to tell her, rather than what she was actually asking me to hear. The third time, she came to my desk on a Tuesday morning and sat down without asking and said, "I think he knows I've been looking at the account." She didn't say Hesse's name. She didn't need to. She said it the way you say something when you've moved past hoping you're wrong. I asked her what she meant by hurt. She said she meant professionally, that she'd seen it happen to others, and that she didn't have anything documented that couldn't be explained away, and that alone, without backup, the documentation could be characterized as her error rather than evidence. I didn't offer to help. I told myself I didn't have enough information. I told myself it wasn't my place. 14 days later, Patricia was placed on a performance improvement plan. The stated issues were accuracy errors and failure to follow procedure. Patricia had not had a single documented performance issue in 11 years. She resigned before the plan concluded. She sent a brief farewell email. She was gone within the week. 3 months after Patricia left, an external audit flagged the client account she had named. The audit found systematic overbilling over an approximately 20-month period. Hesse was put on administrative leave. The company issued a statement about remediation. I was interviewed as part of the internal review. I told them what Patricia had told me, and when she had told me it. The interviewer wrote it down and moved on. He didn't ask me why I hadn't acted on it sooner. Maybe he already knew the answer. I've looked for Patricia online. She's not hard to find. She works in records management at a smaller firm now, Seems to be doing fine from what little is publicly visible. I've drafted a message to her twice. Both times I deleted it before sending. I'm not sure what I would say. That I heard her and did nothing? That I was present for all 3 conversations and found a reason each time to wait? She already knows that. She was there. The thing I sit with, the thing that doesn't get easier with time, is that Patricia wasn't asking for much. She wasn't asking me to take a risk or confront anyone or put anything on the line. She was just asking me to take her seriously. And I didn't. Not until it was too late to matter.